To truly understand where anything stands in regard to good, evil, or really anything, there needs to be a contrast. You can't just single something out, look at it as for what it is, and then come to some arbitrary decision. I mean, if you'd look at me as myself, you'd be like, hey, this guy might be a bit weird, but then again, I don't know. But if you compare me to literally everyone else on YouTube, let alone real life, you can come to the conclusion, yes, this strange, sarcastic asshole dude is in fact weird. Because if everyone is as weird as I am, then no one is really weird. Or as one of the greatest anime villains of all time said,
and when everyone's super, no one will be.
Truly an underrated anime right there. Not gonna lie, sequel, not as good. But hey, that's how it is with most anime sequels. Anywho, if you have a story that's focused on good versus evil, then yes, they contrast each other quite nicely, pitting the heroes as the good guys and the villains as, well, the bad guys. Pretty straightforward, nicely done contrast, very cool. The downside, though, is we can't contrast any shades of gray whatsoever. We understand that the heroes are the light side of the force and the villains are the dark side of the force, but we don't know any gray side of the forces, fam. And that, in a nutshell, is why Star Wars sucks balls. That was a joke. I just like saying occasional inflammatory comments to piss people off, even though it has no bearing on the actual video. Oh god, I made another one of those memes. Literally nobody. Nux Taku, you don't understand the depth of the philosophy in me triggering people by my random hot takes on media to show the pointlessness within their own existence and the existential crisis that abounds from that is those memes have to die. Anyway, in hero versus villain fights where the hero's ideology is fight for peace, justice, love, all that is good and become the Hokage, well, juxtaposed to the bad guy who's trying to take over the world to spread his meme culture to the far reaches of the earth as he attempts world domination because he has an inferiority complex and he wants to feel important. Now, pitting two forces like this against one another reveals very little as far as the nuances within each force. We understand that memes are the force of darkness, but there are 50 shades of memes, and we're only seeing one. The obvious solution to this issue is something that's breached over and over again in many forms of media, and that's pitting different heroes against one another, clashing their ideologies, thereby contrasting them, and we can understand a different mindset of the different players in the game. Someone like Asta ends up inspiring the Magic Knights in the Black Bulls Guild, just like a rivalry like Deku and Bakugo can flourish so nicely, because while, yes, they both want to become the #1 hero of all time and defeat villains and shiz, their motivations and ideologies can't be more apart. They each learn from each other throughout the series and grow as people thanks to the contact they have with each other. In a nutshell, this is one of the greatest aspects to tournament arcs. It fine-tunes the characters on the hero side, allowing us to see deeper within their own minds and where they plan on going with their lives. Now, this is not a video to praise tournament arcs because, well, people have done that in the past. But, as I've been saying, this is done very often for heroes. The light side of the Force obviously gets far more development than the dark side of the Force because most people are not like me. I mean, I relate to literally every sociopathic psycho nutcase villain, but I guess that's not the primary audience. I wonder why. It's weird. So now, villains can't exactly have tournament arcs because, well, that would be strange. But here is where we get into the meat and potatoes of what the video is about. And I know there's gonna be that one guy in the comments that says, video starts at 3 minutes 40 seconds. Click here to skip to that. And to that guy, how dare you? Oh god, now that I'm saying it, I have a feeling everyone's gonna be doing it. But how dare all of you? Because it's integral to the video. Intros matter, fam. But this, in a nutshell, is why villain versus villain fights are some of the greatest fights in all of anime. Aside from the fact that it's always interesting to see a third party, someone that we weren't following the entire time, it allows us to get such a much deeper deeper understanding for these characters, as well as an appreciation that the world continues running even when we are not following our protagonists. This is a flaw that I see in far too many series. While the protagonist is on screen, literally everyone else in the universe is dead. Makes you almost feel like the protagonist is the only moving part in a still world, whereas showing us villain versus villain conflicts expands our mind to the fact that the world is running even without the protagonist as a focal point. It brings the world to life. So now, with these two initial things in mind, a perspective on the world running without our protagonists, as well as sharpening the shades of gray between beautifully psychotic characters that I relate to, let's fine-tune this further. And I feel like there's no place better to start than Sasuke versus Deidara. Even to this day, one of my favorite fights to come out of the Naruto franchise. I say this is a wonderful example because this is the point in the series where we're finally getting reintroduced to Sasuke. He ran away from the Leaf Village like a little bitch by the end of the first season. That was great. And then in Shippuden, we kind of saw him be a smug-ass putz to Naruto. Glad he's grown up over the last 3 years. He wiped out Orochimaru with not even a single emotion on his face. He gathered Team Taku because he kind of needed dudes on his side. And after wandering about trying to find Itachi, Deidara finds him. I feel like this fight is so important on so many levels. The story is obviously painting Sasuke as a villain at this point, despite the fact that we're following things from his perspective, and it's not like he's trying to do anything per se evil. He took down Orochimaru. I mean, the guy was basically a terrorist pedophile, and he's trying to take down Itachi, a guy who wiped out this entirely seemingly innocent clan, giving Sasuke a perfectly logical reason to have a vendetta against him. Sasuke's obviously a character that had to sacrifice a lot to get to the point he is now, but we do not know where he stands. Fighting Deidara, we almost get a glimpse into his psyche because he is pushed to his limit. Deidara, on the other hand, was always one of my favorite members of the Akatsuki. He was the fun-loving dude. He ran away from his village for the sake of chasing his passion and art. It is something I can respect, minus the blowing up millions of people thing. Don't respect that part, don't take this out of context, but the chasing your passion bit, where he would have potentially been the next Tsuchikage, but he left that for something he truly loves. I admire that in Deidara, but despite all that, he was humiliated when he entered the Akatsuki originally. He realized that no matter how many explosions he can make and how beautiful and fleeting his art is, it doesn't hold a candle to the Sharingan. Itachi defeated Deidara in the first moment of their battle, and to follow up, made him look like a fool, trapping himself in his own bombs thanks to Itachi's genjutsu prowess. He had a hatred, but also an admiration for the Sharingan, and I feel like his fight against Sasuke really fleshed out his character, as well as where Sasuke stands in this point of the story. Granted, not a lot of words were exchanged, so it's not like we understand Sasuke on a deeper level. Sasuke in the beginning of Shippuden was a very straightforward, villain-esque character. He's someone that had a drive for revenge, and he would do anything to get that, no matter who he had to fight, and no matter who he had to push out of his way. Sasuke was a villain because of this one deed he wanted to get done, and he had no future planned past that. In this fight, Sasuke's drive to survive was only because he had unfinished business, and had he finished this business, he would not have minded all that much if Deidara would have finished him there. On the flip side, Deidara really becomes an individual in this fight. We learn about his hatred as well as simultaneous admiration towards Itachi. We learn how he has that thingo in his eye to block Sharingan Genjutsu. We learn how he abandoned his mission, which was to assassinate Orochimaru, because he wanted to fight Sasuke to prove to himself that he was superior. This fight for him was a passion project, not a necessity at all. We learned that at the very end of Deidara's life, he blew himself up to kill Sasuke, and in his mind, that was worth it, because that is his passion and art overpowering the Sharingan that he considered the pinnacle of what art was. Deidara was an artist, and like every artist, he was nuts! I relate. But that's what made him great. Until this point, we kind of saw the Akatsuki as an autonomous unit. People had their own missions, they carried out their missions, and we didn't really see past that. The zombie duo Hidan and Kakuzu, despite the fact that they had their own basic personality traits, they kind of did what they were supposed to do. Same with Sasori, Itachi, and Kisame, who were the only other Akatsuki members we've met until this point. Deidara adds an individuality to the group. He's not evil for the sake of evil. In fact, I wouldn't even call him evil. The only thing evil about him is that he put puts his heart into his passion above into other people's lives. It's more of a driven sociopathy than any actual evil. The fight between Deidara and Sasuke is a perfect example of this, because it fleshes out Sasuke's purpose in this story as a semi-antagonist, and it fleshes out the beauty and individualistic nature of the Akatsuki, as well as Deidara to be a full-round great character, and one of the most underrated characters in the series in my personal opinion. So, I'm really glad I got to be able to mention this one first. However, since Sasuke is sort of the protagonist, I feel like this tackles the understanding by contrast aspect of villain fights. However, discussing the world moving even without the guidance of the protagonist, I would like to turn your attention to the Marineford War from One Piece. So now, I picked these two to start with because both Sasuke and Luffy are protagonists of their respective series, and they are both present in these fights. So I wanted to tackle it from an angle where the protagonist is there, however, it is still a villain versus villain battle, which ends up expounding upon so much more than what it could have been without this mindset. The Marineford War, after billions of chapters of setup, I mean, goddamn, was, I think, better than anyone expected leading up to it. I wouldn't know, I only caught up to One Piece after that, but it blew me away reading it. It fully fleshed out the entire political structure of the world. Literally all the world powers were in one place. You got the Whitebeard pirates, you got the Marines, you got the warlords, Blackbeard and Shanks showed up, and you have Luffy. Very cool. But the main point I want to mention here is the fact that two seemingly endgame One Piece bosses in Akainu and Blackbeard had a little stare down at the end of this war. One Piece is fascinating down to a moral level because Luffy is a protagonist as idealistic as he is, and he never imposes his morals upon anyone. He never gives the massive speeches on how you have to be a good person and jizz. In the end of the day, Luffy's a pirate, and pirates are generally bad guys, but he seems like he's an exception. But they meet other pirates that also seem like exceptions. And at the same time, you have this government that's trying to hold things together, but as we saw in the Enies Lobby arc, they're not all they're cracked up to be either. They're almost tyrannical in the extent of their authoritarianist leadership. Whether someone's a Marine or the pirate, the choice is yours whether they are a good guy or a bad guy. And as far as a moral standpoint, One Piece did an amazing job placing you at this really intricate crossroads where no one can be based on what their status is, but everyone can be based on who they are. All the racism themes in regards to the fishmen, and you got some fishmen that turned out to be good guys, and you got some fishmen that turned out to be evil. No one is defined by their class in One Piece, and that is part of what makes it fantastic. The Marineford War ended with this Blackbeard and Akainu stare down because, as I've mentioned, no one is defined by their class. There are good pirates and bad pirates, good Marines and bad Marines in regards to the moral perspective shown in One Piece, and Blackbeard is what I think anyone would classify as an evil pirate, a true anarchist in the One Piece world, and Akainu is a symbol of authority, not letting anything cross him or they will be annihilated. They are the two extremes of One Piece, and throughout the Marineford War, even though the Whitebeard pirates are pirates, they kind of feel like the good guys. Shanks' crew come at the end, and they seem like good guys. The prisoners that are broken out of Impel Down are written in the perspective of that arc to be the good guys. And it's not like you can call the Marines all bad either for trying to execute a pirate. Sengoku, Aokiji, and Kizaru all did their jobs effectively. Garp, being Luffy's grandfather, is seen in an even more relatable light, and Kobe is viewed from a more good guy moral perspective. The only true embodiment of cruelty on the Marine side is Akainu, someone who views himself as divine judgment. And on the flip side, you have someone who doesn't care about anything, and that's Blackbeard. The end of the Marineford War shaped the entire philosophy of One Piece, pitting the two extremes of Marines and pirates against each other, showing us the crucial dilemma that seems nigh insurmountable. This whole war turned out to be caused by Blackbeard. He manipulated everything behind the scenes to cause as much disaster as possible for the simple goal of making himself stronger. And Akainu honestly didn't care because he properly executed Ace and Whitebeard. For both Akainu and Blackbeard, it was a semi-victory, and that shapes our perspective of the entire One Piece world. That's the beauty of a villain versus villain stare down. They didn't even physically fight at all. but the impact was insane. A One Piece YouTuber, Mr. Morge, made like an entire video discussing the philosophy of One Piece and the clash between authoritarianism and anarchy, and it was a dope video, so I will link it in the description, and feel free to send him cringe in his comment section. That would be very cool. But I'm not trying to dwell on the philosophy of One Piece here, as much as the fact that it's the villain versus villain confrontation that really paints the world an entirely different color. Now, these two fights that I've mentioned, villain versus villain, both contain the protagonist at the scene. And that makes everything so massively different, because since we're seeing things through his eyes, it doesn't evolve the world per se when he's not around. So, One Piece and Naruto both do this in various ways, mostly One Piece, with all the off-screen fights like Aokiji versus Akainu, the Blackbeard Pirates versus the remnants of the Whitebeard Pirates, the Blackbeard Pirates attacking the Revolutionary Army, and so on and so forth. However, there are 5 more fights that I would like to briefly touch upon where the protagonist is not present. First of those 5 would be the League of Villains from My Hero Academia. Now, I will not be spoiling, so the next arc in the anime has a lot of what I'm talking about, as well as the current arc in the manga. But the League of Villains are also seen as quasi-protagonists of the My Hero Academia series. Granted, no, they're not by any means the protagonist, but they also get their own growths and development, protagonist aside. Now, thematically, that makes perfect sense, because even though we're trying to worry about the society of the world, and that is the first and foremost best part of My Hero Academia for me, that definitely includes how the League of Villains makes a place for themselves in the world. So seeing them operate from their own perspective makes everything so much more fascinating. That's on one hand. On the other hand, Shigaraki is supposed to be developing as a foil to Deku. So seeing things from his perspective with his very own trials and tribulations also adds weight to this character development and makes his contrast with Deku so much more interesting. This isn't a My Hero Academia analysis, so I don't really need to get into that. And thirdly, on an ideological level. And this I could talk about because of their altercation with Stain. Shigaraki hated Stain. Stain fought for an ideology that he stood firmly behind. He knew he was being a vigilante, but in his own twisted, warped view of the world, he thought he was righteous, and Shigaraki knows he isn't. We only fully got a picture of Shigaraki's mind when we understood his resentment and detesting of Stain's entire being. Stain became a villain and took matters into his own hands to create some form of order, whereas this paints Shigaraki completely as a harbinger of chaos. The League of Villains also eventually uses Stain's very own demise as a casting call for villains to join them, because they do not need to play by any form of rules. And I can't really say more without getting into spoilery stuff, so the villains are by far my favorite part of My Hero Academia, just because of how they each impact society differently and how society has birthed all these villains in a different way. The League of Villains making a place for themselves, when they duke it out with the heroes, honestly, it's almost boring. It's your typical good versus bad scenario. But when the League of Villains is having altercations with other villains or other villain groups, that is what makes Hero Academia great. That is genuinely what paints a picture of what society is all about. Now, while I'm talking about the beautiful development of villain organizations by clashing with other villains, it would be a crime of me not to talk about the Phantom Troupe, one of the greatest villain organizations in anime, from Hunter x Hunter. Now, one of the things that makes the Phantom Troupe so fascinating is the fact that they are aimless. The beauty of villain organizations is that they have their ideological target that they expend all resources upon capturing and detaining. The Phantom Troupe spits in the face of all of that by not having a defined goal and just moves as a single unit forward, always moving forward. No destination, but always on the move. Now, I say the Phantom Troupe because this is interesting from several sides. On the one hand, the Phantom Troupe was introduced not by fighting heroes, not with the Grand Evil Council, where the main villain is rubbing his hand together maliciously, attempting world domination via Yu-Gi-Oh cards or something. No, we We get introduced to the Phantom Troupe essentially by them getting attacked by the Mafia. Yes, the introduction of the villain organization is by clashing and annihilating another villain organization. It shows their strength, their power, and more importantly, a contrast in ideology. It doesn't matter who they're up against, nothing will stop them from moving forward, and that's even though they don't have a defined goal. When someone is driven to do something, it's generally because of some master plan or some form of passion. Without either of these two things, why push forward? If adversity comes your way, just turn around and try something else. It's not like you were that driven to any goal anyway, but none of that phases the evolution of the Phantom Troupe. They will keep walking and they will stomp and trample over anyone that gets in their way, even if they are another villain organization. An organization that has its set goals. Maybe their set goals are money, but the Phantom Troupes are clearly not anything menial of the sort. You have to realize that the Phantom Troupe is a family, but even more than that, they're a single unit. There are many legs to the spider, and those legs are just used to carry the head forward. The head being Chrollo, and the head being someone not in search of anything physical, but in the search of his own identity. It's a fascinating villain organization, because there's no per se reason for them to even come in contact with the good guys in the story, other than coincidence. They're not trying to take over the world and it's up to the protagonist to stop them. They're not trying to make some form of evil society and the heroes have to stop them. They're not trying to capture the Jinchuriki for a massive cannon. If you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. And that is only seen due to the Mafia interfering in their objective. But it goes further than that, because the next villain-on-villain fight with the Phantom Troupe is none other than the troupe exterminating a little colony of Chimera ants. Why were they doing that, you ask? Because that's what they wanted to do. No reason more than that required. Even the Requiem for Uvogin's demise was done in a way where they were taking down more Mafia members, showing us how much they care for one another. Not like losing a family member, but almost like losing a part of yourself. And it goes without saying that Hisoka versus Chrollo in the manga flips everything on its head, but I won't talk about that for spoiler reasons. The Phantom Troupe is greatness, and the only reason why we know that is because of the altercation with villains that help us see who they are. Had they only met heroes, they would have been viewed in a purely negative light. They would have been looked at as an evil group doing whatever they want at a personal gain. Perhaps it's fun for them. Maybe they like the rush. Or maybe it's for the memes. But no, we don't know any of that, and we don't perceive the Phantom Troupe as anything like that. They're not even remotely similar to any other villain organization ever because of the contrast with other villain organizations. They're not all black-heartedly evil. They're not killing for the sake of killing. They're just one single unit that views themselves as an individual unit that should not be crossed. The next three fights I wanted to bring up are all one-on-one battles, and they serve the purpose of developing one or both sides of this fight to a tremendous degree, and gives us all so much more respect for each individual character. Griffith versus the King of Kushan from the Berserk manga. This will forever be one of my favorite fight scenes of all time, and I've spoken about it in length at other points. Doppio versus Risotto around 5 episodes ago in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which was my favorite fight in JoJo since Jotaro versus Dio. And Garou from One Punch Man, who fights monsters at different points in the manga. Since both Griffith versus the King of Kushan from Berserk and Garou versus monsters in One Punch Man are both manga, and people don't read manga. I don't know what's going on here. No one reads any of these two. Please read them for your own sakes. Unless, of course, you're squeamish, in which case don't read Berserk and instead read One Punch Man like 5 times. You won't regret it, I promise. But both of these fights are to serve the most pivotal purpose in regards to each of these characters. The idea of Griffith at that point in the manga is it wants us to see how the world is regarding him as the savior, while simultaneously we as the viewers regard him in a slightly different way to avoid remarks that may catch non-Berserk fans unaware before they've seen that scene at the end of the 1997 anime. And in regards to Garou, despite the fact that he's striving so hard to become a monster, his feet are implanted and rooted in humanity, making him one of the most human characters in the entirety of One Punch Man, as I've mentioned in a previous video that you could even see that from his introduction in the anime. And his fights against monsters only further proves this and made Garou one of my 3 favorite characters in One Punch Man, because not only is he a psychopath, so I relate to him on a spiritual level. No, it's actually sad because I really do relate to him, and he is a psychopath. Why do I legitimately relate to every psychopath? I don't know what it says about me. I mean, probably nothing, but worth thinking about. But this is the very same Garou that sweats upwards, fam. Saitama scared him and he sweat upwards. I relate to sweating upwards on a spiritual... Okay, enough of that. But when he raises arms against monsters, several times now, as far as where I'm up to in the manga, it really contrasts him with them and makes you feel more towards him than almost any other character. Garou, the human trying his hardest to run away from humanity and become a monster, is the most human character in all of One Punch Man, and it's freaking beautiful. But most of all, it's this contrast that really shows it. Now, before talking about Doppio versus Risotto from JoJo's, there is one more quick villain versus villain fight I wanted to mention, and that would be Marik Ishtar versus Bakura from Yu-Gi-Oh! Battle City. Now, I didn't include this in my major list of the 5 fights I wanted to talk about or whatever, because it didn't really do anything in regard to growing either character. Bakura is my favorite character in OG Yu-Gi-Oh! And I will definitely make a video on him at one point or another, but this was to show the power of the Egyptian god cards. Villain versus villain is also a pivotal way to express the severity of a situation aside from growing individual characters. Until this point, we saw the Millennium items as the peak of what the mystical world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Had to offer. But here come the Egyptian god cards and tear that shiz apart. The Egyptian gods are a level above anything we've seen until here, and Marik beating Bakura is a perfect way to set the stage for the severity of what is to come. All this said and done, however, and I feel like I painted a more or less decent picture as to why villain versus villain fights are so goddamn satisfying, and you love them even if you didn't know why you loved them. My actual inspiration for making this video was Doppio versus Risotto from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5. This fight was everything in an anime fight. There were 2 villains that literally had their lives on the line, where their entire lives were leading up to this moment. The boss building his empire around keeping his identity secret, and Risotto, due to revenge, beginning his obsession of killing the boss. All of Risotto's friends have died on this journey thus far, and he is the last remaining member of the Hitman team trying their hardest to take him down. Risotto finally found him. This fight was brains and wit on all sides. 2 overpowered abilities clashing against each other, each side trying to outthink the other, and I understand this is not an art of a fight scene video. This is the beauty of 2 villains going at it. Unfortunately, too many people have not seen JoJo's, and this video is a broad anime topic, so I don't really want to spoil because I don't want to ruin the conclusion of this fight to anyone. Anyone who's wrapped up with the narrative of Part 5 will know who the victor is, but the way he wins is fascinating. He uses his surroundings to the utmost, and he's completely outplayed by his adversary, despite the fact that King Crimson is the most ridiculously overpowered stand ever. King Crimson is still outmaneuvered by Metallicum, and yet Crimson remains the king. It makes the final adversary for Part 5 of JoJo's all the more terrifying, knowing that he has this insane intellect and battle genius on his side, besides for the most ridiculously overpowered stand ability ever. This fight did literally exactly what it was supposed to do. Aside from being superficially phenomenal, it gave me an awe and fear of the victor that the main characters are going to have to face, as well as an interesting glimpse into the psychology of this character. And it gave me simultaneously the most respect to the point of pity for the character that actually lost the fight. This antagonist for the entire series, until this point, has become a character I genuinely felt for, devoting his everything and his very being to this one thing, and it's not just that he failed, but it's that he almost succeeded. And even in his dying breath, he managed to think of a crazy way to take his opponent with him, but that didn't work either, just due to the insanity of his enemy stand. This was an edge-of-your-seat fight. It was gut-wrenching at the finale, and it made both characters exactly what they were supposed to be in the eyes of the viewers. It's something only a villain versus villain fight could do properly, even though none of the members fighting in this fight yelled "Kono Diyoda!" not even once. Some say that they didn't yell Kono Dioda because neither of them are Dio, but to those non-believers they say, I walk around yelling Kono Dioda, and I'm not Dio. That debunks your theory with the sheer sanity of Nux Taku. That's right, if I do it, it must be normal. But in any case, this video went on for a relatively long amount of time. I really wanted to get this point across as well as possible because being that I love villains so much more than heroes, if they're written well, I wanted to give a proper homage to villain versus villain fights because I feel like no one ever spoke about how amazing they are. Leave a like if you enjoyed and subscribe if you would like more. Link is in the description to my Twitter and Patreon. No time for a fancy outro, but remember to stay weird, fam. You can tell if you're weird by contrasting yourself to other people. I say other people, not me, because contrasting yourself to me will not prove you to not be weird. That's guaranteed.